Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Shannon, and I cannot wait to join you today. I'm going to be on webcam just for a minute here, and then we're going to dive into our presentation all about Numeracy Talks with Numeracy Development. And so I hope you have some great takeaways from our webinar today, and I can't wait to hear how you enjoy it. You can contact us on our website at sis4teachers.org. You also can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and even LinkedIn at the handle at sis4teachers.org. For this webinar, we created a special link on our website, which is sis4teachers.org/ESGI webinar. We have a free gift for you at the end of the webinar that will tell you everything that you need to know as to how to access this. Any videos that you see me previewing in this particular webinar, we have featured on your special link. So there's several training videos that will extend your learning from what you're learning today on the webinar that you will be able to use in your classroom with your students, and we'll give you a great feature as well as some downloadable handouts that we'll talk about. One of those handouts is this amazing poster that we have. We have one for early childhood, which is our early childhood poster looking at the 8 mathematical practices. In some states, you might call these the process standards, but this is sort of the, instead of teaching math a mile long, we're teaching it a mile deep and really getting our young learners to apply what they're learning. Kids today have Siri, and they have a phone that they can ask all kinds of mathematical questions on. But for this particular concepts in math, as we try to get kids to apply it, we want them to go through these 8 mathematical practices. And so there's lots of different information that you can check out on the 8 math practices on our website and on our special link. As we look at numeracy development, we're going to be looking at all 8 of these math practices as we get kids to really be able to look for and make use of structure when they're understanding, especially when we get into our numeracy talks. Kids in your classroom might be constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others, as well as modeling with mathematics. So let's talk about for a minute, why are more and more kids coming to school lacking in numeracy development? Well, let's take a look at that picture that we have here. What do you notice that all of the kids are doing? Now that we're doing a lot of virtual learning, I feel like a lot more of this is going to be prevalent for the kids that we're working with. What are some reasons that you can think of that students are coming into your classroom, especially our littles that would be struggling in the area of numeracy development? I kind of want to break these down into my top 5 things that numeracy development will really be kind of at the forefront of maybe why some of the kids are coming in a little bit more at risk. Number 1 is we have kids that are really having less and less experiences with real objects in the physical world. If you look at kids coming into your classrooms, a lot of times they're not doing puzzles, and they don't have games, and they don't have hands-on things in their house even, because they're more plugged in. Creativity and exploration with real objects in the physical world, also known as play, is really a pivotal piece that we'll talk about in the development of numeracy. Number 2 is oral language development. You can see it, this family's at the table and everyone's on their phone. Have you ever gone out to a restaurant and kind of looked at different families and see how much interaction is going, or maybe seeing a 2-year-old the parents can survive with a YouTube video on? The oral language that happens around us is so important for the development of mathematics, getting kids to talk about different things while they might be on a walk, or while they might be in a car, or having conversations even about routines as we eat dinner is really important with our understanding of math. And so if kids are lacking in this, obviously that's going to be one of those areas that they're not going to have the readiness for math when they get into your classroom. Number 3 really looks at kinesthetic development. Kinesthetic development seems like, wait, how is that related to math? But kids being able to skip fluidly really relates to their understanding of patterns, just like students that can have dynamic and static balance is sort of the precursor for reading. So we'll look at kinesthetic development and really take a deep dive into looking at kids' skills to make sure they have something called Kinesthetic One-to-One Correspondence. Number 4 is problem solving. A lot of kids have everything at their fingertips in the 21st century. They can ask Siri, they can ask, very quickly and get information almost automatically. When the going gets tough for a lot of kids, especially littles, what do they do in your preschool and kindergarten classrooms? A lot of kids just give up. They don't want to try, because when something involves a little bit of grit, they don't want to do it. And so getting kids to be problem solvers and to seek out solutions for themselves in their way of their perception is really important in math. Number 5, a lot of teachers don't think of, but the visual memory of students is really important. If you think about being plugged in all day, that's really prohibiting the visual memory of students. In fact, I feel that visual memory is of the weakest of the skills of many of our kids in class. Think about how long it takes kids to remember their letters and sounds, or even sight words, or even numbers. And so a lot of kids, because they're so plugged in, the visual memories are actually created for them through the visualization of a game or a TV show or whatever they might be using. For them to replicate it themselves, like to think about numeracy skills or phonemic awareness skills, they have to kind of visualize that and use their brain themselves. And so a lot of our kids today, even if you ask them something like, what does your bedroom look like? Or what did you have for dinner last night? Or what were you wearing yesterday? Those images have to be replicated by the child in their brain. And so it really is helpful for kids to really get the idea of this as they're developing, especially in the area of math as we're looking at it. So as we look at these, we kind of have this pyramid, which a lot of our teachers love, because it kind of helps put their knowledge of math into basic terms of them understanding the levels of it, just like you might understand it in literacy. And so this is going to be on that link in the PDFs that I have for you. But we're first going to look at that bottom bar, and we'll build our way up all the way into Numeracy Talk and some fun things that you can do. But the idea of real objects in the physical world, it starts as early as age 2, or even could start early with a lot of oral language in a household. And so one of the things that is really great is for us to be able to experience real objects in the physical world. So we might not think about this, but even at the age of 2 or earlier, students are starting to understand the awareness of distance by climbing and reaching, going for walks, counting their steps, crawling, maybe even pushing toys or throwing a ball. Even though we might not be measuring that distance, they're starting to understand how far away something is versus how long it might take to maybe walk around their house or around the block. Students start to have this early understanding of awareness of weight, maybe if they help putting groceries away or having something in their hand that's plastic versus metal, a toy that they might be having, carrying rocks, putting away their toys, even climbing or trying to pull themselves up, maybe on the monkey bars. They start to understand that idea of weight. Awareness of patterns, like setting the table, playing with Legos. You know, a lot of times the Legos even themselves are almost built in a way that are sort of like predetermined, you know, do step 1 and then do step 2 and then do step 3. You know, in the past we used to have a big pile of Legos, and kids would kind of just play with those Legos, and they could create their own car in kind of their own way, and making sure the pattern of one side of the car is equal to the other side. I know things like setting the table. Even when our son was in kindergarten, you know, he had to set the table for the 4 of us, but he could make it in any way that he wanted, as long as the pattern was the same. A lot of these conversations with parents, especially of littles and even preschool and kindergarten, can help them really understand that mathematical thinking is all around us. But I remember my son setting the table, and he would do a plate, and he put the cup on top of the plate and would put our napkin and silverware inside of our cup. As long as all 4 settings were the same, he was really getting that idea of patterning. Coloring, cutting. When you think sometimes that at homes today, when I go on preschool home visits, sometimes parents don't want all of those crafts and maybe Play-Doh or things because it's messy. But kids really do discover the understanding of patterns early on by doing a lot of those things, even with music and skipping. The awareness of frequency takes place when they're listening to music, maybe counting cars when they're in, you're in the car. We might play a game called Tally O'Malley, and we're going to count how many red cars you see, and I'm going to count how many blue cars I see, and somebody else in the car might count how many trucks they see for a certain given time and see who has the most. Students also understand the awareness of time by waiting for dinner, maybe waiting for mom to get off the phone. I know right now where I live in Michigan, we're certainly noticing the position of the sun as the sun is going down very early and our days seem to be a lot shorter, and I've already seen some trees changing color. Kids might count down with links for a holiday or a special event, maybe by doing linking cubes that are linking paper chain that they could kind of rip off each of those. Even the idea of equations, it's very rare that you go to a playground and see a teeter-totter or a seesaw anymore, but the idea of the weight on one side and the weight on the other and equaling really helps kids understand the beginning parts of equations, like those sand and water tables and building blocks and Legos. And so all of these things really help kids to really understand that idea of equations. The takeaway message here is that children will develop symbolic thinking skills only after they've had sufficient learning experiences with real objects in our physical world. What is the one thing, if you look in early childhood, if perhaps an early childhood person did not make this rule, that maybe has been taken away in your kindergarten classroom? We all know that answer is play. And if we look at this idea of play, we can connect mathematical skills to each of those areas of play that kids are doing. And so I think as we look at this pyramid of real objects in the physical world, it's really important that we embrace this with our littles in our classroom. One of the series that I created for you and even linked in to your special link for you for joining the webinar with me today is this idea of real objects in the physical world. Obviously, if we can have in kindergarten play, we can get these mathematical skills to develop. But what about at home? Maybe when kids are in preschool or before they get into kindergarten or when they go home. And so these 4 videos that I created are really great for parents. They're really quick, 3 or 4 minutes that you can feature in maybe your open house or maybe even parent-teacher conferences, even for kids that maybe are in kindergarten with you but have younger kids, is how to create a math-friendly home in the bathroom. And so in this video, when you look at it on our website, I kind of take parents on a tour of their home, showing them where mathematical thinking is all around them. You or I might think some of these things are really obvious, when in fact, parents don't necessarily know about the mathematical thinking that they can express. A lot of times, parents are told, let's read these books and let's bring literacy in, but they don't really understand that part of it for math. You also can look at the video that's creating a math-friendly home in your living room or bedroom, creating a math-friendly home in your yard, and then we even have one in the kitchen. The cool thing about these videos is it comes with a really nice download that parents can do, a 1-page download they can have for free from SIS for Teachers, post it up in their kitchen, maybe in a kitchen cabinet for the things that they want to do to make a math-friendly home in their kitchen, maybe on their bathroom mirror, they post the one that has to do with the bedroom and the bathroom and the living room, and so forth. And so parents can really get a good idea of how to use that resource. We hope that you enjoy to use that in your room or with your students. So as we look at that bottom layer of real objects in the physical world, we will want kids to have thousands and thousands and thousands of experiences with this before they ever enter into our school. It's just like oral language. We want kids to have interactions with oral language to help build that idea for literacy. And so if we can get kids to have that as they come into their preschool years, that's what's really going to matter. Let's take a look at that next layer called the kinesthetic learning experience. The kinesthetic learning experience, you might be asking, what does that look like? One of the cool things is with kinesthetic one-to-one, not everyone really necessarily tells you what kinesthetic one-to-one really is, because we're always focused on the concrete one-to-one. And so I'm going to kind of show you what you might notice with some of your students as we look here at this visualizer. I'm going to switch this over on my desktop here so you can see. One of the tools that I have here is called the Counting Buddy. It's one of the math manipulatives that I designed. I have a book that we'll talk about a little bit later that I sort of designed 50 activities that go with the Counting Buddy. This guy here is the Counting Buddy Junior. He has 5 of one color and 5 of another, has a head and a hook. A lot of our kids hook these to their backpacks, and he has little feet, and even the beads move nicely on a macrame beaded style. Now, if I was practicing with a student, maybe on the counting buddy or even with counters, I might say, you know, Johnny, can you count like I do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, when I'm counting, my 1-to-1 with my hands is matching exactly what I'm doing. You could give the counting buddy to Johnny, and he might say, okay, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sometimes you might say, no, you're not understanding what I'm saying. I really want you to look at it with these counters. I'm going to put these counters out and have you take a look at them, and I want you to see how I count them. Watch how I do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I want you to do it. A child does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They stop. They have no idea. You know what I'm talking about if you have tried to help a student gain the knowledge of understanding one-to-one correspondence with objects. It's like pulling your hair out. You even get crazy and do things exaggerated, like watch me, 1, and then you go way over here, 2, watch I'm going across the table, Johnny, and see how I'm doing it, 3, and the second that kid gets it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's very frustrating. I'm here to tell you that you're probably working on the wrong layer of the brain. If the kid isn't getting this, more than likely we need to back up the bus and take a look at their kinesthetic one-to-one correspondence, which is what we're going to look at here. We have 2 students that I'm working with in this video that are checking out their kinesthetic one-to-one correspondence. You also can check out this video on the website, link at the bottom, where I kind of put the videos that I'm featuring in the webinar right at your fingertips. You don't have to search on the website to find it. But there's 2 students that we have walking on the poly spots. I'm going to share this video just for a minute so you can take a look to see how well are the kids getting it. So let's check this out. Our first student we're going to look at is Ken.
1, 2, 3. Perfect. Go on to the beginning again.
You're trying to see if they have kinesthetic
I want you to go to the
one-to-one
number
as they're
5
counting.
and stop. Go ahead.
Just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got it.
Excellent. Go ahead. Go
1-to-1
back.
is great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Nice job, honey. Go on back. This time you're going to walk to the number 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Good.
You can see this student really has the kinesthetic one-to-one. If I gave her counters, you could probably predict that she would count them pretty well. I want you now to look at student B, Allison, in this example, and tell me how you think she might do if you gave her manipulatives.
3.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, good. Okay, go on back. This time I'm going to see you do the same thing, but stop at 5. Go slow. Ready? Go to the number 5. Count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Was she
Okay, go ahead,
one-to-one
one more time
there?
to go to 5.
1, 2,
Okay, count and walk your steps to the 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, what number are you on? Count those steps. What number?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Count and walk your steps to the number 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, is that 6?
Uh-huh.
Okay, how do you know it's 6?
Because I walked all the way down here.
You walked all the way down here.
So as we look at that, you can tell and probably predict from those 2 students. If the video is lagged at all from us recording on the webinar, you always can watch it, like I said, on the link below. But the idea here is to look at those 2 students, really ask in preschool or kindergarten, how many of your kids have that kinesthetic one-to-one? We don't often talk about that in our books, but it's a really important piece. If kids can do it on the poly spots, we like to have them walk off the poly spot and just see, do they have one-to-one correspondence with their body? I bet you could predict what our 2 students will look like. Let's take a look.
And count your steps.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Perfect
And
one-to-one.
count and walk your steps to me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Count and walk your steps to me.
7, 8, 9.
So as we look at those kiddos, you probably are saying, oh, wow, Shannon, I have some of those in my classroom. So when we look at this and we want to dive right into that math book that we were given by our, by our school district, what is it that we end up really saying to ourselves? So how do I assess the kinesthetic one-to-one correspondence? Well, that's where our friends at ESGI come in. I was able to work this summer on getting all of my assessments loaded, and one of the things on there is our kinesthetic one-to-one screener. The great thing about this is I have tutorial videos that not only just tell you how to use it with ESGI, but also what to do with it. What do you do when you end up having kids that don't have kinesthetic one-to-one? So in this video that you'll also see in the hallway linked, I will go through and explain to you exactly how you get your poly spots on our website, how you put the dot on the website, and then we'll even take a feature to look at this on ESGI Test Explorer. I'll walk you through in this video everything that you need to know to how to screen your kids. Even if you don't have ESGI, you can download it for your free trial on us from SIS, the number 4 teachers. Put that in as your code. You can test this out and screen your kids quickly on the screener to see how well they do on it. And so I think this information will really provide you with a quick list, just looking off this fall. Who are the kids in my classroom that look like Allison? What kids in my classroom look like Jordan? And you can get that idea right away. The cool thing about this is that kinesthetic one-to-one correspondence does not take long to develop. If you did 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks, some of the kids, it's just lack of exposure. And so what resources could you use to help students that might be looking a little bit more like our second student on the video? There's lots of different things you can do, like having kids count their steps, quick, fast, fun things. Maybe pattern tapping, where they are using patterns kinesthetically with their hands and their knees or other body part. They have to replicate it. Maybe they're taking bean bags and they're throwing them into a target or catching and holding them, and you're telling them to stop once they get to a certain number. Those poly spots have all different kinds of activities that you can do, even from adding, subtracting, missing, add-in, lots of things that you could do with kids. On the right, you see the oldie but goodie, my favorite book. I went to Michigan State University, started off my student teaching, and we used Mathematics Their Way. The book is online. If you look for it under Mathematics Their Way, you can take a look at the activities. And I bet if you ask someone in your building if they have this book, they probably do. This book is filled with kinesthetic, developmentally appropriate ways. It still was written in the 70s and really hasn't changed much, but it is, there's nothing bad about it. You can't change early childhood, right? It's what it should be. It's all the great things that we wish our kindergarten and preschool classrooms could be filled with. And so if you are a preschool teacher, we really encourage you to spend the first half of the year developing with those 4-year-olds this kinesthetic process. If you're a kindergarten teacher and you find kids that have this, you want to catch them within the first month of school. This oftentimes when we look back, at this pyramid, an ignored layer. We don't talk about it. We're going to start adding when we get into second grade or starting to kindergarten, and we're going to have kids, right away get into algorithms when they're not really quite ready for that concept. And so this kinesthetic learning experience, we want to not just take it lightly, but to really find different things that students can do in their classroom to really help them to get this idea. As we develop the real objects in the physical world at home or with parents or even in our classrooms, and then we eventually start to develop this kinesthetic learning experience, the brain starts to be ready for something called CPA. You may have heard the pictorial as, representational. There's certainly lots of different words for concrete, pictorial, abstract. Concrete could be thought of as conceptual or hands-on. Pictorial could be representation, pictures, or a pictorial representation of mathematical thinking. Abstract could be thought of as, sort of that algorithm. If you think about how you and I learned, most of us learned in that light blue area first. We learned the abstract learning and oftentimes didn't understand the why, but we just understood the how. We were just told what to do and how the math should be learned. And if we learned that procedure, even though we might not have understood the concept, in our teacher's mind, we had it. Because back in the day, we didn't use the 8 mathematical practices. We weren't asking kids to really apply their learning, right? We weren't asking kids to tell us why they know what they know. It was just get it down and be done with it. So this whole idea, as we look at, these 8 math practices that I kind of showed you at the very beginning, the most important piece of this is that we want kids to be able to explain. Kids today can ask Siri what 25 times 4 is, if they can't figure it out. But the idea of them being able to apply it and understand it is what's needed. Even if you think of the world today and you look at factories and all the machine, it's really all about innovation. And kids that can just regurgitate algorithms, that really isn't helping them be problem solvers for today's world. And so we always say the kids in elementary school today, many of the jobs that they're going to have aren't even created yet. And so sometimes we think, I learned this certain way, I'm just going to teach it that same way to my child or to my students. But in reality, it's the application of what we're looking for within this concept. So as we start to look at this idea of concrete, pictorial, abstract, we have to ask ourselves, where does this start? Just to make sure you understand the idea of concrete, pictorial, abstract, or if you thought about it as representational. The idea would be to be able to visualize something like you see on the left. We have 8 and then we have 5. And so concretely, kids are kind of visualizing, which is part of this idea of math practice 7, which is getting to sort of look at the structure and maybe being able to make a 10. A lot of times we say make a 10, and some kids might show it with 8 in the top and 5 in the bottom, and realize they could push those 2 yellow ones up into those empty spaces to make that 10. We would want to spend a good time with conversations with kids to understand that part of it before we move on to the pictorial representation. Pictorial representations do not always mean that we draw 8 flowers and then we draw 5 more flowers and we circle 10 and we end up showing it in a picture. Of course, in pre-K and part of kindergarten, we do that, but the pictorial part of it is to really show it in a number bond or show it how we would decompose it. And so how we maybe might model how we did it. And the abstract is actually the new problem that we created. So we're going to go over just for a second to the visualizer to kind of show this example, just so you understand the idea of concrete, pictorial, abstract. We'll kind of make this bigger. This is the Counting Buddy Junior and the Counting Buddy Senior. As you can tell, he's a little bit longer than our Counting Buddy Junior. We use the Counting Buddy Junior in a lot of our pre-K K classes, and then in our first and second grade, we really use this guy here. Some of our kindergarten teachers use the senior actually for their teen numbers. But we know the answer is 13 to that problem, but let's actually build that problem concretely. As kids work with the Counting Buddy, they start to understand that there's 10 of one color and 10 of another color, as you can see on our Counting Buddy. And so we first build our first add-in, which is 8. We find it easier to be able to make a 10 than going back to one-to-one count. But let's say I wanted to go ahead and add the 5. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 5 in here so you can see that I'm adding 8 plus 5. To get kids to see make a 10 sounds like a very abstract thing. Might even be showing on a 100 chart or trying to get kids to get it maybe on a double 10 frame. They don't quite see it. A lot of our kids, when they see this concept concretely, it helps them to understand the abstract concept. So kids would say, well, instead of counting all of those beads, I'm going to decompose our 5 into 2 and 3 to make that 10. So now without counting, I can tell you it's 13. This is using numeracy. We're not actually even using any numbers here. We're having kids really develop this concept of addition and making a 10, but I'm not necessarily using anything maybe abstract for them to look at it. As we kind of move on, you might have kids get into that pictorial representation and then abstract. Obviously, this concept that we're talking about here is more of a first grade math concept. So how do we make sure that kids are ready to really move this idea from the foundations of numeracy development from the concrete to create what we call conceptual thinking? What I was showing you on the Counting Buddy, kids could think of concretely and use it, but they also could use it in their brain and kind of think of it conceptually. If you think of this idea a little bit like, phonemic awareness, a lot of kids, you can't really see phonemic awareness because it's really the play on sounds and moving sounds and segmenting and onset and rhyme and all of those great things. The same thing with numeracy. You necessarily can't hold it, but getting kids to have that conceptual thinking and sort of understand that is really what we're going for. I think in today's world, we sometimes hear a lot of these buzzwords and ideas like subitizing. I remember when subitizing came out, maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, and people said, what is subitize? What is that? And all subitizing is really just tell me how many without counting. But is subitizing a mathematical milestone? Is there some book that I missed from when I first started teaching 20 years ago that I didn't realize that there was a checklist of kids having to subitize? I don't see it on my report card. What does that exactly mean? Subitizing is not a mathematical milestone. However, it is a strategy, and it is a strategy to teach something called conservation to a number. What does that mean? Well, that child has 5 fingers in that particular picture. This child is not going to grow any more fingers, that's for sure. We hope this child does not lose any fingers, but we know that that is 5. When you are working with our littles and you say it's 5, and you maybe ask them to show you to add 2 more, what do? Do they just touch that one hand and say that it's 5 and then count down 6, 7? No, they don't do that. They touch and count every single one of those fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then some kids say 1, 2 when they're counting to 7. And you might even say, Johnny, how many is that on my hand? It's 5. Okay, honey, so if we added 5 and then we added 2 more, how many would it be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's again like that kinesthetic one-to-one corresponding. Like, why can't you just see the quantity that you already know and count on, which is that early addition skill that kids will learn? Well, part of this is because they don't have conservation to a number. Conservation to a number can start to develop as early as age 4 in a very rich oral language environment using a lot of the things that we talked about in the area of the pyramid. I will find kids even as old as 2nd grade, and even some adults that might not have conservation to a number even higher. So what I thought we could do is have a little bit of fun to see how your skills are on conservation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to test your skills along with learning a little bit more about this to help you to understand how to screen kids on this with ESGI. And what do I do with kids to help them to develop the skill if they don't have it? So let's have this kind of concept here. I can't actually see you because we're doing it on a webinar, but I want you to look at the slide and then I want you to tell me how many you see. So we see that slide. How many do we see? You've done a lot of these activities in your classroom with flashing 5 frames and 10 frames and scatters. But do you really know why you're doing that? Do you really know the levels of the students that are doing that? How well do the kids use the 8 mathematical practices to explain what they know? So maybe in a numeracy talk, kids put their thumb on their heart and you might say, I knew that it was 4. Why is it 4? Some kids just say, I just thunk it in my brain because they know it. Oftentimes you want to give an explanation. Some kids might say, well, I just know that 2 and 2 is 4. It's a great way. I know that 1 and 3 is 4. What are we trying to work on early on, even with preschoolers when we do this? We usually start this concept in January of our 4-year-old preschool, and we start right away in kindergarten, obviously working with those kids with kinesthetic, but we want kids to say things like, well, I know that it's 4 because there's 1 empty. I'll never forget a girl that I was working with in a kindergarten classroom that said to me that I actually flashed a 5 on the 5 frame, and she said, I know that it's 5. And I said, well, how do you know? And she goes, well, he just told me it's 5. I looked around and there were no boys sitting by her. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. I said, well, how did he know it was 5? And she said, well, he told me that there was 3 and there was 2 more. That's what he told me. And I told the child's name was Maya. And I said, Maya, you are absolutely correct. It is 5. And he's correct that it's 2 and 3. But can I ask you who he is? And she said, my brain. And I said, why is it a boy? But when you think about that, kids today, they don't really know. It's like a little voice in their head. They're kind of questioning their own, they're learning how to question their own metacognition. So it's not just about flashing this really fast to see if kids can get it, but can they flash it and tell you things like what's one more and what's one less, or how many are empty? Asking those different questions is what's really going to develop the concept. How is this different when we flash something like this to students and say, how many did you see? Most kids will say, lady, it's still 4. I mean, I've screened kids on this in many of our project schools that we do with our Molding Math Mindset schools. And I remember last fall, a kid saying, it's still 4, you know, even though you showed me one way, it's still 4. But I had another boy that said right after that, that could totally tell me that there was 4 on it horizontally when I showed it to him vertically. He said, I don't know, that's a lot. Because to him, it looked like a different orientation. So if the child has it here, and then you show it here, if they don't transfer that or haven't really gotten the visual memory imprint in their brain, what are kids going to go back to? You got it. They're going to touch 1, 2, 3, 4, which is what we don't want kids to do. It's an idea of conservation with them to know quickly. What happens if we took this and said, okay, how many do you see now? How about now? How many do you see? This is the idea of a scattered arrangements. I see lots of scatters being flashed in the hundreds of classrooms that I'm in every year doing our coaching model. And when I ask teachers, you know, what level are you on? It's like, well, I'm just flashing, Shannon. I'm just flashing. They're not getting it. Understand? Not this is for all kids. I don't really get it. But what you notice here is we are slowing this process down. We're just looking at conservation to what? Conservation to 5. This is a pivotal level of students' understanding, especially in the area of kindergarten. Just because you show the 5 frame doesn't mean that they have conservation to 5. If they are doing it in all these different modalities, vertically, horizontally, and a scatter, then I feel more confident. And that kids can manipulate it. So seeing that, what's 1 less? What's 1 more? What's 2 more? What's 2 less? In this case, when you see it in a frame, how many are empty? Those questions are the questions that we look for in this level. As we move on to the 10 frame, which is just going to be a basis for how our numeracy talks are going to work, that I'm going to share with you towards the end of the presentation, which you'll really find, I think, fun to do in your classroom this year. And we even have a couple of freebie gifts for you for it. This idea obviously here is working on conservation to 10. How many did you see? I saw 8. How did you know? I saw 5 on the top and 3 on the bottom. Another kid might say, that's not how I saw it. It's really important when you're doing conservation to 10, I think, when kids are explaining what they know or how they know what they know, that you really make a big deal showing it. So some kids might say it's 5 on the top and 3 on the bottom. Another kid might say, nope, I saw 4 to the left like the dice, and then I saw 4. I'm going to go back over to our visualizer again, to one of my favorite tools that we have on our website. I literally could not do numeracy without it. It's our magnetic two-sided double 10 frame. So as we look at this, you know, and kids are showing it, you might have had that 8 displayed. The beginning parts of number bonds and getting kids to understand part total, even though we're doing numeracy, is starting to build with this concept. If a kid says, I saw 5 on the top and 3 on the bottom, I'm going to show it this way. I might even later in the year put an 8 and then make my number bond with 5 and 3. Another kid said, nope, that's not how I saw it. I saw 4 over here, and then I saw 4 over here. Hey, let me write that down. I'm going to show that. Some kids might say, if I were to think of that whole 10 frame filled, I know there were 2 missing, so 10 take away 2 is 8. The more you can model and get kids to understand that concept that they're teaching is really important. It's also really important, that concept that we say, mixed modalities. That is 10, conservation to 10, but we also want kids to be able to see it in different ways. So if I show this in the linear way, it's another way for kids to get it. Yes, the 10 frame has 5 on the top and 5 on the bottom, but this is a linear 5 and 5. We want to check and ensure that kids can see it in multiple ways so they have a solid foundation. So if I were to flash the counting buddy here, can kids build it on their counting buddy after seeing it? If you said, I'm going to show you this number, and on your counting buddy, I want you to show one less, can they do that? And so this idea of looking at these different modalities, especially when we're trying to look at where kids are in these levels, is really important. So as we look at this idea of the counting buddy junior, it's the 5 on the top and 5 on the bottom. I wrote a book that's called My Counting Buddy. It has 50 activities. We love giving this book and a buddy to parents when they start either in preschool or in kindergarten to help them. But the idea is that they're seeing that 8 like that. Can they also see the 8 like that? Or when they change the orientation, are your kids going back to one-to-one counting? Now, that means they necessarily haven't built what's called conservation to 10. As we continue, these scatters get a lot more complex, right? This is kind of, a lot of kids say 10 for this because it looks like 2 dice if you look at it quickly. But the idea is this is 5 and 3, and how you saw it versus how I saw it could be really different. I may have saw the 6 like the dice and then the 2 in the middle. Somebody may have saw a 5 like a dice and a 3 off to the side. So there's lots of different ways that kids could have experienced this, and there's a certain time when this is appropriate. If kids can do lots of different things with adding 1 more on, 1 less, 2 more, 2 less, how many are empty. They get to do it in this modality of the linear way, and then the scatter, it shows that they've got it. Now, this level here is where we start our first graders on with the 10 frame. In our preschools, we kind of end at this level. In preschool, it's really difficult for kids in preschool. It's too high for them actually to scatter to 10. But first grade, we start off our year. Second grade, we start off with this double 10 frame idea. And so again, we're just taking this idea of numeracy. And you can notice we haven't used any numbers because we're talking about numeracy development. So 10 at the top and 3 on the bottom. Why do you know it's 13? Do you know because you see 7 empty? And so the same concept that we're talking about here, even with the Counting Buddies Senior, we want kids to see this in the linear way, and so to get this concept and be able to manipulate it in different ways, and not just to tell me how many you see quickly, but to be able to tell me different things. So in the Counting Buddy, we might say how many were not shown. So to the left, you see the 13, and although it seems weird if you use a Rekenrek or a Counting Buddy, it's always clear to the right, and then you move, you move the beads to the left, and then you would read from left to right. So it kind of looks confusing, but to the right of the screen, the beads that are not shown. And so to get kids to be able to see, oh, there's 7 beads that were not shown that are off to the right. Again, we're building that visualization for mathematics with the area of numeracy. The last level, obviously, in our conservation to 20 is looking at it in what we might call a Rekenrek or a number rack. Of course, there's 18 different names for things in math, but the idea is there's a row on the top and a row on the bottom. Can your kids manipulate this by telling you what 1 more, 1 less is? How many were not shown? Can kids even tell you what 5 less is? Are they really getting our number system? Our number system is base 10. And the idea of kids understanding this early on is really what we're trying to do here. So this level here, we look at conservation to 20. We actually end our kindergarten year that way. Our first graders start off with conservation to 10, and then they move on to 20 to kind of practice that in the first half of the year before they go to number talks. And then in our second grade year, we spent about the first month just kind of reviewing. But in second grade, I also encourage, doing something like that, like how many did you see? If you're trying to remember what you saw on the screen, even if you're in the webinar with me today, you have to re-replicate that picture and find a way that you're certainly not going to be able to count those 1 to 1, right? And so this is the understanding, the early understanding of place value. How many groups of 10 do you see? I see 10, 20, 30, and then there's 4. We do a ton of stuff with place value with our place value strips that you can check out on our website at SAS4teachers.org. But the idea of getting kids to tell you how many are empty, what is the whole? The whole would be 40 if they were all filled. How many do you see? I see that there's 34 filled. How many are not filled? 6. So if you think about number bonds going up higher, that's really important. This is kind of your challenge to see if I show you this next screen, which again, we could get first graders to even do these levels, no problem. How many do you see? Okay, how many did you see there? Well, at first you might be thinking some of the abacus will actually switch colors. I made it more challenging on this one, so it wouldn't switch at 50. But the idea here is, the abacus has 100. This is our number system. So I know that I see 96 7, and 3 more would make it 100. Could kids tell you what 10 less would be? What would 10 more be? Can they play around with this? And so as early as first grade, kids should be able to have this idea of conservation to 100 without any numbers and be able to really play. So the idea you're probably wondering is, I wonder how my students are doing on this concept of conservation to 5 to 10 to 20. Well, I personally did ESGI. I'm a friend of ESGI, and I ended up putting my screeners that I've used and done research on for years. I was able this summer to put them on ESGI. I'm super excited because we were able to produce some videos that if maybe a teaching partner of yours is not on the webinar today, but you want to say, hey, check out these videos. This concept that Shannon's talking about, we don't have this in our screener, and we look at our preschooler and kindergartners. And so when you go to the webinar, link you can find also on our website, but I did a special landing page knowing everyone's busy and you want to just get to these quickly. But there's that kinesthetic one that I showed you off to the right, and then I show you in depth in the conservation to 5, there's a conservation to 10 and a conservation to 20 video. Hey, you could get ESGI for a year for free. You could get it on us by doing SIS, the number 4 teachers, by trying out your free trial for 30 or 60 days, and then maybe see if that's something that you want to do. You can get instant results about your kids right away, which is going to be great. The tutorial videos are set up similar to how we showed you with even the kinesthetic one. This one I'm just kind of showing you a little bit of an example of what the video looks like, and you can check it out. Article, and then I talk about the different ways of conservation, and then I show you exactly where to find this in the Test Explorer. And the Test Explorer, the coolest part is it's going to assess not just to see if your kids have memorized the 5 frame, but it's going to look at the 5 frame vertically, horizontally, and in a scatter. Do you realize in an instant using this screener that you could find out where your kids are? We waste so much time trying to screen our kids, especially with littles. No one understands how much time it takes to take every single folder, pull every single kid, get out all the 5 frame cards. And when you think about how long this screener would take without ESGI, I might as well forget it. By the time I get my kids screened, I might as well do something different. And so the idea of this is, I have all my kids screened. I use the ESGI screeners. I have a list of where kids are. Obviously, if I'm a preschool teacher, I'm going to do that ESGI Kinesthetic One-to-One. If I find a student in kindergarten fails the conservation to 5, we have you go back to check to see if they have that kinesthetic layer. If they do well on the conservation to 5, go ahead and check out to see if they have conservation to 10. The idea is finding a baseline and a ceiling for where kids are in these concepts so that you can differentiate. So you might be asking yourself, okay, Shannon, I'm getting this idea. I totally have a better understanding about numeracy development. I have all of my kids screened, and I have this math book, and so now what do I do? So here are some resources of where we could go next. One of our favorite tools to use is Deco Dots. Deco Dots is a deck of cards that is super fun to use. It's in all of our schools that we use. And it's really great for parents too. So our Deco Dots really is kind of a fun feature when you look at it. It actually is differentiation at its finest. It's 4 decks in one. Now you might be saying to me, Shannon, I see 3 colors in one. What are you talking about? We're going to take a look a little bit closer at Deco Dots and give you some ideas as to how you can implement some of these things in your classroom. So our Deco Dot layers, just so you understand them and understand the research and the reasoning behind how I developed the Deco Dots, is there's a level that's kind of working on this idea of conservation to 5. So our friend Dotson, who's one of our mini math mites, he kind of works with the littles, and he's a superhero that is loves dots. That's why his name is Dotson, and he likes for kids to explain their thinking. And so if you look at our deck of cards, there's a red, yellow, and green level. The red level is going to be all 5 frames that you see Dotson kind of holding off to the left, or you see pictured at the top. These are going to be games that if you saw kids, that it's kind of like reading if you were really independent at that level. I know if you pass the screener on ESGI, I'm going to give you the red level for Deco Dots to go play in a station or use it at home, because you're going to have that understanding of conservation to 5 kind of in an organized way. The green level actually splits into 2 different levels. Kids don't know that. but we do as teachers. Half of the deck is scatters to 5, and the other half of the deck is scatters 6 through 10. So if I know I have kids that are working on conservation to 5, maybe they can't do it independently, I'm going to pull these 2 decks for instructional purposes for those kids. If we look at the other decks that we have inside of Deco-Dots, the other deck that we have is our yellow deck. The yellow deck is all organized, depicted the same 10 frames. We oftentimes can do lots of those flashing skills where I might put 3 full 10 frames and some more and see if kids can build higher numbers as they get older. But as we look at the scatter deck, if you look at dots and they're holding all those cards, we have lots of different scatters. You look on the right, and they're in red and blue to help kids to start to understand that concept of part total. Now, as you look in the deck of Deco-Dots, we'll kind of show you the deck here on the visualizer. I'll make this just a little bit bigger here so you can see it. Our Deco-Dots kind of comes, people always ask, do I have to buy all the decks? Nope, they're all in one. And so when you open the deck of Deco-Dots, it actually has all 3 colors. You'll see that green deck is quite a bit thicker because in the green deck, it actually has 2 different levels in it, like I kind of explained. And the way that you'll notice, we have all of these, of course, on video, is the beginning decks. Obviously, when a deck is fresh, it's kind of nice because they're all going to be quantities 0 to 5. But later, as we go, Dotson is going to have stars on his sneakers. If Dotson has stars on his sneakers, it means that these scatters are going to be a lot higher. They're going to be higher than 6. And so we have this deck kind of hidden where there's stars on his sneakers and then not dark stars. So it kind of divides into 2 different decks, if you will. There are all kinds of games. Kids even look up their own games to kind of go with this concept. But if you play Deco-Dots and maybe you were looking for a certain quantity and you wanted to play the game like Slapjack, you know, kids could flip different quantities and maybe you want them to slap it when they find a certain number, like this one, the number 7, kids would slap it and they would take that deck as a part of their own cards. The nice thing about Deco-Dots is it's very user-friendly. A lot of our schools, they learn Deco-Dots really as early as even preschool, and they use them all the way up even into 3rd grade. And so the way we have Deco-Dots designed on our website that I also linked for you in the ESGI webinar that you can go to is being able to see different games and video tutorials where I show you. You also have game boards and accountability sheets. What I love about the accountability sheets is that sometimes even my kinders are at the station playing Deco-Dot-Train, let's say, but I don't necessarily know if they're playing it the right way because I'm not right with them. So the idea of the game boards and the accountability sheets is it kind of comes as one package and might be one of the free gifts I might be giving you at the end of the webinar. You'll have to stay tuned to see. So a really great way to help build numeracy and practice is to be able to play games and make differentiation invisible in your classroom. Everyone in your classroom could be playing the game, let's say less, same, more, but nobody knows that one kid has a yellow deck and the other kid has a red deck because they're playing on different levels. And so every game in Deco-Dots also has a challenge level, which a lot of our older kids like, that we can kind of extend this idea from pre-K all the way to 3. The other part that we can do is really help with Numeracy Talks. You may not have realized it, but I was actually doing some Numeracy Talks with you in some of the other exercises that we were talking about. Now, some teachers might say, what is she talking about? I have heard about number talks in my classroom. What's the difference between number talks and numeracy talks? Well, number talks on the right side that you see are math mites, which is a character line that I developed that really helps students solve mathematical equations 3 ways plus the traditional. You have T-Pops there with the balding hair and the cane. He does the traditional method. Some of you may have heard of our friend DC from our animated video that's out, where he does a lot of decomposing and making 10 and decade strategies. Or you may have even seen the video on Springling where she's hopping on an open number line. Each of those characters are to help students to really understand strategies within algorithms. So in that case, it really has to do more with the foundations of number sense. That is not what Numeracy Talks are. Numeracy Talks, as you know, are not going to use numbers. The Math Mites are using numbers, and you can check out more on our Math Mites on our website. But Numeracy Talks is kind of more for our math with littles, with our character Dodson and even the counting buddy, where we have different levels that kids are going to be placed in based on maybe the screener that you've done on ESGI or based on where your kids are doing, how your kids are doing in the classroom. We have a Numeracy Talk video that's usually just on our M-Cube Molding Math Mindset membership site, but for you watching the webinar today, I gave you the video on the link below for you to check out, all on how Numeracy Talks works.
And so
we talk about how kindergartners in this video are doing Numeracy Talks and really giving you the basics for how to set up, if you decide to get the progression cards on our website as a download, how you would set these up, and how really every tool that you would need in this video will help you get them set up. We have kids that replicate things on mats to show that they understand the numeracy, that not only can they tell you by visually seeing it, I'll show you how to use the math work mats on here, as well as how to use the two-sided counters to get kids to explain their thinking. So that video you'll want to check out because it really talks about the Numeracy Talk basics. And then we also have different videos on each of these different things. And the one thing that I did this year was for the Numeracy Talks is I really made it so that you could have the PowerPoints that go with it, so that if you are virtual teaching this year, how am I going to do my Numeracy Talk, Shannon, if I don't have my kids here? Well, on our Numeracy Talk bundles that you can find on our sisforteachers.org/shop, show you the different modalities. In fact, on your special link, we have a free level for the red, yellow, and green. We give you the first card, and there's a video that go with it that you could kind of get the idea. You can check out the free one and then decide if it's something that you want to continue in your classroom. But the way the Numeracy Talks work, that we'll kind of talk a lot on the Numeracy Talk Basics video, is really getting kids to follow the same things that they normally would in a number talk. Put your thumb on your heart when you have an answer. Be sure to shout out your answer. If you have the same answer as somebody or strategy, you're going to sign me too. And so in that basics video, it will tell you how to get the Numeracy Talk set up in your classroom. And as you can imagine, the PowerPoints are filled with lots of the different things that you see, from the scatters to the 5 frames to all of those different things. There's even a section in the Numeracy Talks where students build on their mat. So you might flash something like this: hold it in your brain, hold it in your brain, and when I say go, I want you to build it. Ready, set, go. Are kids able to pull that image up in their head? I saw the 8. I'm going to build it now on there. Even if you asked kids, hey, I want you to see that. I do not want you to build that on your mat. I want you to show me on my mat, on your mat, 2 less. So when you're walking around the classroom, you can see, are kids really getting this, or are they just memorizing the 10 frame? If you walk around and see kids that only have 2 on their mat, which is possible, because you said take 2 away, or you see kids that just have 6, you might see different kids that actually still just have the 8 because they don't understand what you mean by 2 less. And so it's really important, any of these modalities in the Numeracy Talks, that you're asking different questions. Hey, could you build on your mat? How many are empty? And so the idea of asking these different questions instead of just flashing and tell me how many is really the pivotal piece of why this is so important. So the questioning strategy, like what is 1 more? What's 1 less? What's 2 more? What's 2 less? How many are empty? Is really what's going to help your students to be really strong in this area. Because if they can manipulate that concept and show it, you are creating a foundation of numeracy, which is really, when we go back to this idea of looking at what that pyramid is saying, it really helps for kids to be able to really apply their thinking in mathematics, because now they have more of this conceptual understanding and they're ready now, have the readiness skills that you could start to bring in the numbers and the algorithms. Oftentimes in schools, we get so quickly into, let's do, adding to 5. Do you have fluency in that? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about, lady. And so we really want kids to have that as well. So we hope that you'll check out our Numeracy Talk bundles as well. If you are liking some of the different videos and the different ideas, we just launched our M-Cube Molding Math Mindsets membership. We have it very affordable for schools if it's something that you're looking for in your virtual or face-to-face teaching. Either of these are really great. We have different kinds of access to our whole download vault, all of the PowerPoint presentations. We're adding in more and more videos every month based on what you're teaching. So by the end of the year, there'll be hundreds of videos that you can access, from how to play different games to numeracy games to having accountability sheets, number bond cards. All the ideas that we have are in here. And we have a really large group of teachers that are part of this M-Cube Molding Math Mindset, but you also get special coaching from me throughout the year. So if you want to check it out, check out our website and you can see what that is all about. And then we also have a free gift for you. So we are so happy that you joined us for our webinar that SIS is going to give you a free gift. You can check out that free gift at sis.teachers.org/ESGI webinar. And we also have a 15% off coupon. So sometimes we're more visual as we think of things. So I'm going to just pop on really quick to this link and show you the special link that we designed just for you for being a part of our ESGI webinar with us. You can get the free download, which is going to be all of our numeracy bundle of all of our Deco-Dot games that you can use in your classroom. We also have really great links that you can use in our navigation tool. You can go to those ESGI tutorials I talked about if you want to see more about Deco-Dots, more about Numeracy Talks. Some of the other PDFs that I have in here are the downloads that you're probably asking about, like the 8 math practice poster that I showed you, or the pyramid. We have the links for families to all of the real objects in the physical world. And then we also have our featured products. So you can either use any of those icons to help you jump to that. And we have some products that we kind of picked out that are sort of our favorite. And then don't forget our promo code that we have for you there. And so we hope you check out that. So we are so excited that you joined us today, and we hope that you'll be able to connect with us on our website at sis4teachers.org. And again, you can see us on all of our social media handles at the handle at sis4teachers.